for people to pop in, and we'll do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll get started. Hello, Carl. Thank you for joining us. And Dawn and Darren we've got as well. We're meant to be over 30 people, so either people are running late or people are going to wait for the recording, aren't they? That's always the way we send it out.
Yeah.
I'm never sure what people can see when I look at these things either. Can everyone just see the main screen, the main presentation screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Right. View all. Right.
Okay. I think if me and Dennis just do our little intros and we just do the housekeeping bits as people join in. So thank you everybody for joining. So this presentation is very much, or the webinar is around the rise of outcome-based HR. Myself and Dennis are both CEOs of our own companies. I run the Find Your Flex group, which has been around since 2017. And Dennis, do you want to talk a little bit around Green River Technology World?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I've got Green River Technology World, which is a business that grew out of a previous partnership consultancy. One of us retired. Some people say it should have been me, which was called HR Means Business. And she retired 2 years ago, and I had a company called Green River because I was trying to promote some new technology about 10 years ago. So Green River specifically is about HR and HR tech. You know, we do all types of consultancy and so on. And one of our side products is called HR Software Finder, which is an online HR tech selector. And I've been in HR for so many decades, I've forgotten, but I still love it.
Absolutely. And we're both research analysts for Blaw Research Group. The research that we've done for today has all been conducted by Blaw Research. We're still in the process of conducting that research, and we would love to be able to speak to everybody who attends this call to really understand kind of what's going on in their organisations. Part of my my role as CEO of the Find Your Flex group and part of Blaw Research Group is I'm also a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Modern Employment. So one of the big hopes out of conducting all of this research and speaking to you guys and ensuring that we keep following up with you guys is that we can pull together some white papers, research papers to go directly into the Modern Employment APPG and try and enable some good direction to come out from government and hopefully some legislation around a few of the areas that we're going to be talking about today. We would love for you guys to contribute to the conversation today, so do ask questions as we go through in the chat. Dennis is going to be picking those up. There are going to be some slides where you're going to stick your hand in the air and come on screen and have a chat and put your raw in as well. But this is very much about the future of work, workforce planning for HRDs and business leaders, and how we can help start crafting outcome-based HR, outcome-based jobs, etc., etc. I've got one final little bit of housekeeping for myself. My little girl is really unwell. She is currently fast asleep, so if she does wake up, I'm going to be leaving you in Dennis's capable hands while I go and make sure she's okay, but then I'll be back. So yeah, that was just to be upfront about what might happen, because these things always happen. So have I missed anything, Dennis? Are we good to crack on?
You're good to go.
Wonderful. Okay, so the first area that we wanted to cover off is the problem with traditional workforce planning and why HR is stuck in the past. So as we've been conducting our research and interviews, we've been looking at obviously a lot of content that's coming out of various different advisories. We've been talking to people actually who work in HR that can give us a real-time view. And these were the main 5 things that we felt kind of came out from that, and the problems that these were crafting as we move forward and start talking about the future of work. we're going to be moving and looking at each of these areas individually as we move through the presentation, but this just gives you an overview of kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So the first being the fact that most of our job descriptions are old and outdated, are based on time-based productivity, and how we monetize our staff versus outcome-based, which is around value creation and what we actually need our people to bring to the table and how that aligns with the outcomes of the organization. One of the things that we are continuously seeing in the press on LinkedIn is that HR is often seen as an admin function and not a strategic partner of the organization. And a lot of that has then led to HR tech and HR institutions like the CIPD, etc., failing to lead in terms of AI adoption, in terms of future of work focused stuff, which means that we end up seeing vendors trying to do that, or other organizations trying to do that, because we're not getting that leadership and insight that we need. This and all of these four things then lead to ongoing problems and that we continuously try to put plasters over, which is the boom and bust cycles of hiring and firing in our organizations with no real long-term workforce vision. And it's about how do we get out of those boom and bust cycles, because whether it's the budget that the government give us each year, whether it's not drafting job descriptions in a way that lead to the bottom line of our organizations, and we're just repeating, bringing the same old people into our organizations, it all leads in, all these 4 points lead into boom and bust cycles that we just continually see within HR and within how we hire and how we do our workforce planning. The big elephant in the room this year from all of the research that we've done is around AI driving the biggest challenge for HR, and not just HR, actually more broadly across the C-suite within an organization. AI, it's not just automating work, it's redefining it. And what we're going to talk about today is the rise of AI and the impact it can have on workforce planning, the positive and the negative. We're talking about how AI to date feels like it's being adopted at a cost-saving level rather than a strategic level. So that's something that we're going to be kind of covering off the challenges around that. We're going to be looking at the fact that job descriptions, because they're not evolving, and the work may be evolving, but the job descriptions and what we're pumping out aren't particularly evolving. As AI takes over, it's in itself causing issues for CTOs, for organizations trying to look at, well, how do we bring AI in, whether it's for fusion work or whether it is cost saving? How do we bring AI in accurately if what we're telling our CTOs is not actually what's being performed by the employees we have in our organization? And we've got some stats around that we're going to be sharing with you, and we'll be discussing in detail and giving you guys the opportunity to talk about as well. In terms of AI governance, it needs to be aligned with our HR strategies. The problem that we have around AI at the minute is that from a government perspective, they've chosen not to legislate or to work with the EU or sign up to the EU strategy around AI. So there's going to be a big conversation as we move forward around AI governance and how that will need to be led out from businesses, and how HR really needs to have a voice in that governance, because I think there's a lot of elements within that can trip us up and lead to non-cost saving issues as we move forward. And the last part, and what we'll be talking about in more detail on the next slide, I believe, is point 4 around AI trained employees, making humans within our organizations unemployable, and what the impact of that might be more broadly in society, and within our organizations themselves. And I guess as us at HR, because I guess we're all in HR for the people, right? So it's about how do we look at that and look at the ethics that sit around AI and how we manage the people that are coming into and exiting our organizations. So why has HR been left behind in the AI revolution? This is kind of cyclical. HR institutions themselves, HR bodies, are failing to provide AI workforce planning and leadership. Major HR tech vendors are focusing more on compliance, not transformation, because they're not getting that leadership from the HR institutions. Neither are they getting them from your companies, because you guys are waiting for them to give you the steer, or that's how it certainly seems with the research that we've had coming through so far, that things are, people are sort of waiting it to be vendor led versus actually what do businesses need. Because I think where AI is coming in, we're having to look at, well, what skills do we need for the future? How do we create outcome-based job descriptions? And without all of this stuff, HR tech vendors can't design the products. And because if we're not moving in that direction, HR tech vendors won't design a product that they're unsure what people need. And I'm going to let Dennis talk through that in a second, because that's obviously his bag. And obviously the lack of real thought leadership is creating an AI governance vacuum. So we just end up in a little bit of a vicious circle here in terms
Definitely.
of how we get this working. Dennis, do you want to pick up on this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think part of the problem is that HR has been rooted rather well. We were actually left at the starting post. I don't think on tech particularly, and now on AI, we've almost overcompensated. We've been a long time, trying to get into the tech scene. We're still not using it right. We're not deploying it right. We're falling down the usual traps. Now we've got AI coming on the picture, and everybody's desperate to use it, but they're not quite sure why. So that, therefore, as Jenny says, the vendors should be driven. Products should be driven by the clients. The problem is the clients aren't actually driving them. So the vendors are providing tech which they think we need. Obviously, they speak to HR people, but there's usually a lot of gap between what the product is and what we actually need. So AI has really been visualized by a lot of HR people as automation. Automation's been around, for 20 years or so. So if you're sort of automating the parsing of CVs and so on, that's not really using it in its best possible way. And then added to this, we have the sort of the thought leadership gap. The institutions are not harnessing all the thought leaders that are drifting around out there, and there's a lot of them out there. The institutions are driving a little, I talk about CIPD, SHRM, it's happening all over the world. The thinking, what should be the leading thinking, is still very much rooted in what they know, rather than reaching out to some of the people. There's some great people out there driving new stuff. So that's why we're kind of being left behind. We all feel we want AI, but we're not quite sure why. Which isn't, we had the same at the turn of the century. Everybody wanted a website, but they didn't know why and what they're going to do with it. So I think there's some very definite roles that AI has to play in HR, which we'll obviously be looking at. And it's going to be quite revolutionary in a way. From my point of view, I see a lot of admin is going to be dealt with in this way, and we'll have to look at how we can harness it for best advantage.
Yeah. And make sure that the time it alleviates is allowed to go back into innovation, and ensuring that those people have that creativity and use of voice in innovation and as we move forward.
I was just going to add one last thing. The opportunity to move to outcome-based results is a win for HR if we can do it. Part of why we've suffered so far is the fact that nobody can actually point exactly to what we do and what it looks like. We know the job has many strands, but there's not many things you can actually point to and say HR did that. So if we move to outcome-based, that's going to give us a more solid foundation for the whole, the whole profession, the whole activity. We will then be able to speak with some authority on this. So if outcomes would actually be quite a big saver for our profession.
Yeah. And like you said, Dennis, earlier, I think it moves us into that strategic HR conversation.
Yeah.
And for us not to be seen as an administrative body within an organisation, but actually a part of the organisation that really does add value to the bottom line, and in terms of like both the people and what that each individual company is trying to achieve. I'm going to move on. So I know some of you guys are on the call. As I've used your mugshots from LinkedIn. So we wanted to pull out a few of the points that, as we've done the research so far, and we, like I said, we are still working through everybody who wanted to know more about these subjects. We've got 6 research questions we're going through people, and I'm really glad these 3 guys were so candid with me in terms of everything future of work related challenging within their various organizations. And I just wanted to pull out 3 or 4 things that seem to be continuously repeated. No matter who we've spoken to so far, these are the things that keep coming up. So HR still being viewed as compliance focused in large enterprises. Lack of strategic workforce planning at national level. HR, as well as other organisations across our sort of businesses, so whether it's CTO, CFO, etc., see AI as a cost saving tool versus it being utilised as a talent driver, and that, you know, because we're so stuck in the past in terms of how our organisations are designed, in terms of the hierarchy and things like that, and how our businesses finance themselves, and how we design our roles within those organizations. Businesses are still struggling with hybrid and flexible working models. So start talking about AI and outcomes, it always feels like a step too far, but actually flexibility can be absolutely blasted right open with the adoption of AI and outcome-based working, because fusion work just goes hand in hand together, and because it all ties to the bottom line, it means you've got happy shareholders, happy C-suite, and hopefully happy people in your organization, because everybody's got a real clear route to the money, to earning what they're worth, to adding a proper value proposition to organizations and to the people within it. So I can only this slide is about thanking everybody who's already given their research already and shared with us, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to everybody else who's on the call and who wanted the information from this event, so they can really build out this piece of research and add some real value as we drive it back into government.
Chenny, one thing,
yeah.
could you just give us a very rapid definition of fusion working, how you visualize that?
Yeah, so fusion work for me, it's very much around augmenting human potential with AI versus replacing them with AI, or replacing huge swathes of people with AI. It's about unleashing that innovation and creativity, so that the time and productivity that we get back from introducing AI, we actually repurpose that into our organization. So it would still be a cost saving tool, but actually giving people back, I guess, the power to be creative, to do the critical thinking and the creative thinking and the innovation that our organizations need. Because obviously, as we adopt AI and that comes into our organization, it can only do tasks, it can only deliver outputs. We need our people to deliver outcomes, and AI requires oversight. It requires innovating. It requires tweaking. We essentially need to make digital twins of all of our employees to really ensure that we are getting the absolute most out of AI. So fusion work for us, which is trademarked to Blow Research, and I'm happy to send everybody a script or like a package afterwards around fusion work and kind of what that means. But I feel like that really, if we're adopting fusion work and we're adopting AI in the same breath, it just sits nicely together in terms of how we identify our people.
I was going to say, one question that might roll on from that is, if we look at the lower levels in our organizations, are these the ones most at risk? That don't have such a high knowledge factor?
Yes. The process-based roles are obviously most at risk of automation, because anything that's process-based can and will be automated. But I think it comes back to the poor job design, and actually just job design that we've had to kind of, that we've seen being the standard, I think, across most businesses over the last 40, 50, 60 years, and that we've done some polls recently, and we're going to move on to it onto the next slide around job descriptions and job design and what that means. I know we've heard some anecdotal evidence from people that we've done the research with about people leaving an organisation for a period of time, coming back in, and the job description hasn't changed, but actually the role has moved on greatly. And I think that's reflected here. So we're going to talk about how do we move from hours worked to value delivered. And one of the first things that we did, we went out to market and said to everybody in our networks, what does your job look like versus the job description you actually applied for? 90% of people who responded were, the job description does not match the job that I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, we want you guys to contribute on this. So we, start sticking your hands up, start putting your questions in. If you want to come on and talk, please do. But we felt that this was a big thing, especially as we started to look to outcomes and how we look at jobs within our organisations. If we're giving these job descriptions to our CTOs to go off and look at AI and HR tech vendors, but actually the jobs that we're giving them is not the job that's done, there's going to be massive gaps within our organisation from when we pull this AI in. And again, anecdotally, there's a company that we work with, that we know of, that have shared with us, they let all of their HR admins go, but the tech wasn't ready to come in, and the HR admins that are still left there are absolutely swamped because there's a massive gap between what the HR tech can deliver versus what a human being can deliver. And I think as we move away from time-based contracts, we also need to move away from rigid job descriptions. We need to be looking at how often reviewing, because it feels like I'm always talking to HR and talent acquisition people, and they're always doing performance reviews and they're doing this, that, and the other. But actually, how often are we looking at the job description, and how often are we really digging into what are they doing on a day-to-day basis? What outcomes are they delivering? How does that tie back to the business? And as we can see, if 90% of the people in your organization are not doing the job that you all think they're doing, how on earth are you ever going to augment their skill set to drive productivity with AI or any other tool that you might have that you bring into your organization to increase productivity? How are you going to do that realistically if you don't know what your people are doing? And this was a poll that's been in the last couple of weeks, so I think this is something that we all really need to be looking at. Dennis, have you got any?
Yeah, no, it's an incredible result on this poll. I'm going to say we've got a caricature of this style of thing, because now Elon Musk is writing to everybody to say, "What did you do last week?" If they're looking at the job descriptions and then trying to see the performance against it, the JDs actually don't tie up at all. I think there's obviously a time for change. I mean, I'm sure most of us in our careers have found that a job description for a new starter, and they look at it and they read it and they understand it, everybody knows about it, it's put in the filing cabinet or the virtual filing cabinet, and like 3 years later, it's still there. Nothing has happened. And you don't want it to become an industry. I think we need to be a lot more flexible. For instance, I think the output idea is definitely the way. You don't want the 4-page job descriptions because they're very prescriptive. If you've hired somebody for their expertise, you don't want to be telling them in 4 pages exactly what they're going to be doing. So if I was to take a very rough example, say a payroll manager, instead of 4 pages saying you will deal with HMRC, you will close off the year end and so on, you'd probably say you will pay everybody on time in a compliant way, accurately, and within the budget that we've allocated for you to do it. I mean, that's a very broad sweep example, but you can see the way we can head with that. So what you've got, all of those are measurable. You know if everybody's been paid on time, you know if everybody's been paid compliantly and and accurately. You'll know immediately. People will ring you up otherwise. So I mean, they're visual performance achievements. When you look at a job description with perhaps 50 points in it, you can't possibly measure people on that. You might be if you harness AI, but really it's just an industry. So I can see, that's the way we need to move. And those job descriptions, their job purpose more than anything else, I would say. And those lines or little mini paragraphs that say what you want them to do will be not only the measures, but they'll be flexible as well.
Yeah.
So if your payroll manager suddenly has a new activity, that can be added in or taken away and drafted around. So perhaps the way is to actually start off with a pool of, say, let's just for argument's sake, 150 activities which need to be done, outcomes that need to be performed to make the company move efficiently. You then harness them around. Well, Jen is more the expert on me. She's the find your flex expert. But you take those activities as a pool and then distribute them around, and everybody has an allocated set of activities, which will be outcomes, which are easily measurable. The good thing about outcomes is you've only got to look at something to know if it's working or not.
Yeah. And I think it sits quite nicely alongside AI and automation introduction, because we're designing outputs for AI and automation to deliver. So therefore, it for me, it feels more equal to our employees if the employees are then, their role is then defined by delivering the outcomes, based on, the value, not just the task, and how we monetize our people. So do we look to compensate employees based on the contribution they make in our organization, not just the presence? So for example, if a recruiter hires somebody who, is on a £200,000 salary a year, but comes in and actually, it's the right candidate for us. They've done a really great job of bringing this person in, and within 6 months, this person's still in the organisation, has made £2 million for the organisation from that contribution. The salesperson's going to be rewarded based on, what we all get our commission on as salespeople. But really, the recruiter who's brought that person into the organisation, who's really understood what that organisation needs, should be compensated on the contribution that their hires have made to the organisation. So I think it's just a different way of looking at what value our people are adding to our organizations, and using AI and data to measure actual business outcomes and outputs that, regardless of where it sits in our organization, what those people are achieving. So that's one of the first ways, I guess, to shift towards outcome-based HR, is how we redesign jobs, how often we look at jobs, how often we look at, we speak to our people and understand what it is that they're doing and what value that adds to the business, and how we can potentially start monetizing them in different ways that actually drives growth within our organization. And people want to feel valued. They want to feel like they're coming to work and actually it means something. They're not just there for to pick up a paycheck at the everyone. I think that is a big key driver for why we need to work. And unfortunately, I think if we stick to the current way of designing roles, it's going to make it far too easy for AI to come in and start replacing jobs, because we're not tying the value that people bring to an organization to their salary, to their output, to their role, essentially. I can't see any chat or anything that's going on. Do we have any questions on this slide?
No, I think
burning desire.
Nothing's come up. No, I think they're fixated. Everybody's fixated in what we're saying, hopefully. It makes some sense.
Well, obviously, once we've got the job descriptions down and we've started looking at what that looks like, it means that we can actually start having a proper conversation around AI, and how we train AI within our organizations, because it what comes out of the box is not always what our business needs, and we do need to spend time developing it, and I think that leads it to the question of who owns the work, the IP, and the digital twin dilemma. So the legal and ethical risks of AI in HR. With this being the future of work and the rise of outcome-based HR, we really wanted to kind of delve in. So what are the risks and rewards of doing this? And 4 things kind of came up, and we're going to give a scenario on the next slide for you to kind of read through and have a look at, and then we would love for you to contribute and kind of tell us what pops into your brain while you're reading through that. But the areas that we kind of identified was, if an employee trains an AI tool and leaves, should the employer retain the work product? Can they retain the work product? Should companies compensate employees if their AI model remains in use after the employee has left? UK's not legislated around AI IP rights, and what risk does that pose? I think a lot of people that we've spoken to kind of feel like IP is covered off in current contracts, but actually the GDPR legislation and various articles within that offsets IP rights. So it'd be interesting to get your guys' take on that. And then the big question that I know Dennis was kind of shocked at when I brought it up with him was, can you make redundancies if the job itself still exists but is now performed by AI? And what financial risks and legal and ethical risks does that pose for an organisation too? And that's essentially what we're going to talk about on this one. So can you make an employee redundant if their work still exists through AI? Please take a couple of minutes just to read through this slide. And then we'd love for you to kind of join in the conversation and talk to us about how you feel this might impact your organisation, or if this is something you've already talked about with your legal teams, or if it's something you've talked about within your own HR department, and kind of how you hope to deal with it, whether you've looked at commission and royalties for people leaving to avoid the right to delete, how you'll get around it potentially by using reparations or licensing fees, and how you would overcome the right to be forgotten part of GDPR. Would anybody like to say anything?
It's one that stops. Well, it certainly stopped me in my tracks thinking about this. We do have a couple of sort of legal opinions, don't we, Jenny? Which I can go through. But interested in people's reactions to that. It looks fairly straightforward, but I'm not sure it necessarily is. Anybody want to have a stab at this one?
Well, as we sort of said, that if traditionally, obviously, if somebody's made redundant, it's because the job doesn't exist anymore. But obviously, in this setting, the job does still exist. It's just being performed by AI. We felt it could open the door for post-redundancy claims where former employees argue that their intellectual contributions, be it their style, their tone of voice, their expertise, or even their voice in some circumstances around customer service and things like that that are being adopted, could still be being monetized by the business. And what does that do in terms of any legal or legal risk that kind of comes off the back of it, and how businesses would manage it? Dennis, do you just want to just talk through kind of what a few things that the lawyers said? I mean, I know a lot of them said that not of it's untested and it would need to be tested in the courts. But I think this was a kind of an area that came up that we didn't feel that anybody was particularly kind of looking at, even though the impact for people could be potentially quite large when organisations are just looking at it from a cost-cutting perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we posed the question, and a sort of a distillation of the answers. One on intellectual property, the IP and ownership rights. If the AI was trained while the employee was under contract of employment, most jurisdictions would consider the outputs of that training as company property, which I think is the interpretation most of us would put on that, unless otherwise stated in the contract. However, if the employee contributed unique personal selling techniques or expertise that were not explicitly part of their job description or contract, they might have a claim that their IP was unfairly appropriated. And if the company benefits financially from the AI continuing to generate revenue using the former employee's methods, they could argue for ongoing compensation under unjust enrichment or IP misappropriation laws. Employees could also argue their personal brand and expertise have been exploited beyond the term or the sense of the employment contract.
I think that's interesting, Dennis, because we're seeing that at the moment, aren't we, in the creative sector with artists. and creative
Definitely.
people that are going through this. And we just felt that actually this could be a bigger issue sort of rolled out. And I've certainly written about this a lot in the press this week around how this impacts people, especially with the GDPR components of the legislation, and how, if businesses are going to a lot of effort and expense to bring in AI. The AI does need training, but then if that employee who's trained it leaves organically, they would have taken their skill set with them. But if something's returning and actually they just turn around and say to the organization, well,
Yes.
anything that I've input into that AI, I want you to delete, that then causes issues for the business. And you spend a lot of time training AI, and then we're going to lose that because of a person's ability to request that or demand that deletion of their trained data once they no longer work for the companies. Like I said, there's ways and means around it. You could offer some form of commission or ongoing royalty, but I think if it's a headache for HR, and I think it's a headache for legal teams within organisations, especially larger organisations, as they bring AI in.
There's a section on voice cloning and data protection. So if the voice was cloned, there are strong legal protections under data protection and biometric laws. GDPR, if the voice cloning was done without explicit consent, the company may be in violation of GDPR, as voice prints are the biometric data. So the employee could demand the deletion of that and potentially sue for damages. And of course, the right to be forgotten. They can request deletion and their personal sales style, arguing that it's personal data. Potential employee claim of data privacy if the company continues to use the AI without consent. Data regulators or courts could then force them to remove and compensate. And additionally, under our employment law, unfair dismissal, loss of earnings. So if AI effectively replaces an employee who was made redundant, the employee might claim unfair dismissal, on the basis of selection, constructive dismissal if the job was made unbearable by AI before redundancy, and any loss of earnings claims which accrue. And employee claims could also affect ongoing royalties or compensation. So if the AI is selling or engaging customers using the voice sales technique and style, as we discussed before, if a contract didn't explicitly give the company indefinite rights, then the employee may well argue they're entitled to ongoing payment. Like everything, it's kind of fuzzy because the laws were never, we might think you're using company tools to create something. I think that's fairly straightforward. The AI actually then has strands of the employee's DNA in it, and so that makes it complicated.
Yeah.
And so contract law, if the employee contract contains clauses on AI training, ownership of work output, and voice data usage, then those clauses will determine the legal position. If there's no clear agreement on voice and AI usage beyond employment, the company may be vulnerable to lawsuits. So there's definitely a point there. The stuff needs to be nailed down quite clearly.
Yeah, and I think that's
seen very
little governance, isn't it?
Sorry, Jenny. I've seen very little in the discussion around AI in the workplace that's actually looking at this question. There's not a lot out there.
No. I mean, there was a lot there that we went through in terms of the legal ramifications of it. Does anybody have anything that they want to say at this point, or have any questions around this, or would like us to dig into this any further with the research that we're doing? Because obviously what we'd like to do at the end of this research is provide you all with ideally a route map to navigate all of this stuff. But is there anything there that we've not really covered off that anybody would like to bring up? Again, I can't see what's going on, so Dennis,
I'm not seeing anything in the chat at the moment.
No problem. Okay.
That's cool. Jane, it's Carl here.
Hi, Carl.
I have a thought. I mean, technology has always usurped roles over time.
Yeah.
And I don't remember ever having to deal with a claim for someone saying things have been sort of stolen or their data used inappropriately, because, as you said before, the sort of contract would cover that off usually. It may be a bit different if their voice or their image is being used.
Mm.
But I'm also, you made me think about the government's AI Opportunities Action Plan, where it's very clear that it wants minimal regulation and it wants to encourage and make sure that things don't get blocked by tenuous privacy arguments. So it might be interesting how that contradicts, or you probably need a bit of case law to work out which way it's going to go.
And I think that was the main feedback from the legal teams that we spoke to, is that a lot of this will play out in court before we get any clear rulings around it. I think the difference with AI versus previous technology that's replaced jobs is that AI requires training by someone, and realistically most organizations are going to use are going to train it by the people within the organization. I know of one company whose head office is in the States, who've literally just told all of their employees around the globe, we're adopting AI, you guys need to train it, you need to make sure that it's helping you within your role. But if at some point there becomes a tipping point where that help in that role becomes the role, and that role gets given to the AI, then essentially you're making somebody redundant, but the role still exists, in terms of how, and it doesn't just have to be tone of voice. Like, I'm a salesperson in my past, and if AI can replicate how I sell, and I leave that organization, that sales digital twin of me selling is still within that organization, in terms of how I would respond to certain queries, how I would push back on certain arguments, how I would deal with a customer. That's still all there, and historically we've not had to deal with that. When employees left, their skill set's gone with them. We haven't been able to twin that. We've got to train another employee to replace them, and they may do it in a slightly different way. So I think that's the difference between previous incarnations of technology coming in and replacing employees to how this has the potential to come in and replace employees. So I think without the governance, I think that's kind of like the first thing we really need to put in place around all of these, and how we design our contracts and how we design our jobs, especially if AI is going to fuse with our workers and run alongside them.
Yes, it's a tricky one. I would say, in the meantime, is to try and make the contracts as watertight as possible, and try and minimize the effect of people with the AI, the personalization of it. In a way, it's not easy, but it certainly has to be dealt with. And you're right. I mean, like most employment law that comes out these days, it's always kind of loose-ended. We've had this for the last 20 years. There's always grey areas, and everybody sits and waits for case-made law.
Yeah.
So we need to preempt that as much as we can, if possible.
Well, I think, and while still being fair as well, and understanding that people are spending their time with AI and are training it for our organisations, and I think, if our organisations are utilising those skill sets when we leave, there is a discussion around fairness, isn't there, in terms of
competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if I put an AI bot together and so on, it's very much working on my basis. If I leave and set up my own company, am I competing with the same tools, or what? There's a lot to be thought about in this. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of fun for lawyers, I'd say.
It is. So thank you very much, Carl, for your thoughts there. I think there's a lot that will come out that we'll need to put in front of the lawyers as this research all comes together, in terms of kind of the how HR leaders should respond, and how businesses need to think about these kind of things. But we wanted to sort of then move from kind of that conversation to, how do we then move these thoughts of HR from, a passive admin to active workforce designers. And we kind of felt that we needed to give you guys some kind of stepping stones, I guess, in terms of how do we move towards outcome-based HR. So obviously it's going to be the regular audit and redesign of all job descriptions. We did, when we ran the poll, where the 90% said the job description didn't match, we ran a parallel poll to employers, saying, to TAs, asking them, how often do you look at job descriptions? Is it when people leave? Is it more regularly than that? Is it like once in a blue moon? And it was quite interesting. I think most job descriptions are looked at sort of every 3 to 5 years, but I kind of feel like at the minute, with the rate of change that's going on within most of our organisations, it definitely needs to be more often than that. But that was one of the first things there: auditing, redesigning job descriptions. Bringing in the start and the end of the process. So what does the CEO want out of this department, and then working backwards from the employee in terms of what they're doing now to actually how do we get to what was the outcome that our CEO needs that department to deliver, and we design the jobs that way. So then to start adopting outcome-based contracts over time-based contracts. So again, we're looking at ensuring that the people who are coming into our organisation know exactly how they add value to our organisation and how they gain value themselves. That we need to create AI governance policies to protect both the employees and the businesses, and we do that in a fair and ethical way. And again, we're going to be providing advice and guidance on that as we move forward, and as we complete the research that we're doing at the minute for the APBG for modern employment. And then we're going to be partnering with smaller, more agile HR tech providers, not just the giants. Because I feel one of the big things that we can do with this piece of research is actually collate a lot of different businesses from lots of different industries to actually understand, well, what are the products and tools that we actually need to make HR tech work for us and work for our organizations. The big players are very much like big organizations. They take time to change and take time to move. It sometimes can be quite generic products that don't really fit our business, and we end up trying to fit our business to the products that we've got and try and pull out what we can. Whereas what we want to do with a lot of this research is look at how can we create more agile HR tech companies so that the solutions that they're pumping out actually benefit businesses and help us move towards outcome-based working, outcome-based organizations, and to start driving mutable enterprises. And then obviously the last thing that you can do is obviously engage with your boards and CFOs on AI strategic workforce impact, and how we do that fairly, how we do that to create the cost cutting that needs to happen, so that we can get rid of these boom and bust cycles that we talked about earlier on in our workforce strategy, but also how do we create a fair and ethical fusion work in our organisation? How do we augment our people's skills with AI versus replacing them, and how do we drive the most out of that from an HR perspective as well as a more broad perspective across the whole workforce? Is there anything you would add to that, Dennis?
I mean, the first point you made, I think, is a key one. Look at what we actually want. Now, you HR people will be interested, hopefully. I took that approach some months ago, and recently I published just a discussion paper, which I've called Reverse Engineering HR, which if anybody's interested, I'll send you the link to that if you send me a message afterwards. And that effectively says, let's start from what business wants from HR, the tangible things, and worked it back to the points of intersection of where HR can actually impact it, so that you can actually tell. And when you look at the outcomes of this, you'll know pretty well if things are working in HR. I think it's it's a start that we'll have to try and apply to all parts of the business. Work it backwards. What is the desired end result? So we don't need 4 pages of job description or whatever, which is prescriptive. We end up with outcomes, basically, which we can look at a thing fairly quickly and say, yes, we think that's working. You don't need to sit down for 2 hours going through a list of 40 items.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to herald a big change for all of us, and for the better.
I think for me, with outcomes as well, I like what it does to the engagement strategies around talent, because you're not being prescriptive. You're going to be engaging talent, and you're essentially, because you know what outcome they need to deliver, you're just going to say to them, like, show me how you would do this. What does this do for DEI? We're not going to be reliant on people leaving university having to tell us what to do. People learn in lots of different ways now. Some people who can't afford to go to university are sitting watching 1,000 hours of YouTube tutorials. They're learning in very different ways than what we've historically been used to. And for me, by designing a job to outcomes, you're allowing people to just this is the outcome we need you to deliver. Show me how you're going to do it, and what does that do to your interview process? What does that do to your engagement? What does that do to the type of talent that you bring into the organization and how they want to be monetized? I think it opens a lot of doors, and I think it's really, really exciting. And when we pair that with AI and with the governance that needs to go around it, I think it doesn't all need to be doom and gloom. Yes, there's going to be, like anything that's implemented, there's always going to be pitfalls, but actually look at what we can release in terms of flexibility, creativity, critical thinking, and innovation within our organizations just by styling our jobs in a different way.
I think it will probably lead partially, to the fractional work patterns in the high levels of expertise, because I think people in responsible jobs these days are looking for new challenges, which aren't always presented by 5 days a week, 250 weeks a year, 50 weeks a year, and so on. So people would want that variety, which at the same time expands their experience as well.
Sure.
So there's, as you said, it's an exciting time to be looking at work, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the other component around it, how traditionally we've always, looked at H-shaped or T-shaped people in terms of how we design, like what it is we're trying to attract. And I think what we're seeing now is that transition to O-shaped talent, especially as we adopt more and more technology and AI into our organizations. And O-shaped talent, just for anybody who's not heard of that term, are individuals who are not just specialized, but who are also agile, outcomes driven, and are open to continuously learning. Those are the professionals, as we see it, who will remain highly employable in an era where AI is automating everything that is routine, essentially. So when we start designing our talent attraction strategies, it's going to be more about how do we bring in the skills and the type of people who are open to learning, and how do we pinpoint those people in our organizations who are already O-shaped but who are not given the opportunity to bring that to the table because of how we've designed our roles. Is there anything there that anybody wants to say on that or would like to add to that conversation? Feel free to just jump in.
Yeah, nothing in the chat, so jump in.
I mean, for us, in terms of what's next, we're inviting everybody on this call and everybody that we're talking to and doing our research with to join in for the movement for strategic HR transformation and to be part of the HR AI policy conversation. As I said, we're doing a lot of this research and we'll be pulling a lot of papers together for government and for you guys. We'll be sharing it with. We obviously want to leverage outcome-based HR to build future-ready businesses. We talked very briefly around mutable enterprises, which are going to be how businesses are designed moving forward. We're already seeing it with the likes of Airbnb and things like that. And we'll also be ensuring that all of our research papers and everything are available to download and to stay connected with you all. Thank you for your time. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. See all your lovely faces again. But yeah, I think there's a lot that we've covered off and a lot of stuff that's being thrown up in the research that we're doing already. We intend to run quite a few more of these webinars this year. We're going to be doing some face-to-face events. The next one's going to be down in London in May. Where we'll be looking at a lot of this stuff in more detail. We'll be feeding you, we'll be plying you with drinks, I'm sure, as well, and we'll have some HR tech vendors there for you guys to chat to. It'll be a panel discussion and an event, and we'd love to invite you guys to that. But if there's anything else that you feel like that we've missed today or that has not come up in the research that we've done so far that you think we need to be talking about, please just shout up and let us know. Myself and Dennis is driving this out within Blow Research, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Any questions? Anybody want any final comments or thoughts? Otherwise, I think we're 4 minutes away from time and we've done an okay job.
Yes, well, that's always the challenge, to make it all fit in without having to rush it or going too slow. Absolutely. So no, I think there's definitely food for thought here, and there's plenty to be done. I think part of it is we will construct that kind of roadmap, how to move from one thing to the next. And I did, as I said before, I think HR is the ideal one to pilot outcomes versus, the old style, because HR, we have to admit, that has a very fuzzy purpose and definition, and we really need to put limits on what we do and what we're supposed to achieve. I think it's something we definitely need. So it's a great place to start. It will give us a good platform for talking about the thing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We'll share the slides with you all, and we'll send you the links for the reports as we get them downloaded. There's a few on there already in terms of the now of work and some of these elements around the legal issues that we're foreseeing coming up. But if there's anything else that anybody needs, I'm Shani, that's Dennis. Our email addresses are on the slides, and we'll obviously send you the links to us on LinkedIn as well. But thank you all for coming, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks now. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.